Welcome to Mystara, boys and girls, for a very special video as I'm showing off more of the now complete Mystara Player's Guide with the second art video showcasing the epic artistry of one Rubelius, or just Rubus. Where Misha did the lion's share of the characters, Rubus was brought on to create the action scenes and replaced a large chunk of the chapter art. For those curious, here's a breakdown with all of his art and all the background and trivia on each piece. And since the book is now complete, I'm just waiting for a thumbs up from the guild and it's time to show off. A couple of years ago, I was still writing the book and needed a good artist that could follow directions, keep a deadline, and not blow my budget. That's the hard part. I had talked to my friends in the industry, and most of them were either on projects or weren't appropriate for the style of book. Dalton Webb might be one of the best illustrators out there today, but he's going to do 1,000 books like Charlotte's Web before he touches a D&D book. A mutual friend of mine told me to contact Rubus over in Greece because he wanted to break into the American market at the time. He is well known in Europe, but outside of a few places here, he's not really well known in the States. We struck up a conversation, and he was chomping at the bit to get art into a Dungeons & Dragons book and agreed to send me something simple for free in the form of a job interview. So I just gave him a list of swords you would find in the Mystara setting. Nothing fancy, just various blades from history like a gladius, a rapier, a scimitar, and a sharp-toothed sword, along with a dwarven and an elven blade. So he sent me this in a couple of days, and I hired him on the spot. The next piece was even simpler. I needed filler for the currency page. We went through the list of nations and their various coins and found out only Vestland had all 5 of the different D&D coins. He did a front and back for each coin from Vestland, with each coin going up in social class as well as value on the side. Wasn't anything fancy, but it looked nice in the end. Then I needed a banner for the gladiator section, and that's when we started meshing because we both loved the concept of the gladiators. We came up with 8 different gladiator schools and a special helm for each school. Like the Romans had a specific helm for their schools, so did Thyatis. Each helm had a vibe to it, so you would know just from the helmet how the gladiators were going to be armed. After he finished, he told me straight up that his talent was in action scenes, and drawing static objects was wasting those talents. He wanted to do more in-depth art from now on. I had to save up some money, but I started thinking bigger for what I had left to do. The first action scene that I paid him for was Ithildown Castle. And this was his kind of second job interview, for lack of a better term, and again, he exceeded all expectations. This handbook is a mix of old and new. As much as I wanted to bring back Jeff D's classic Morgan Ironwolf, there was no way pokies were going to fly in this day and age, especially through chainmail. And even more challenging, massive 80s hair is a bitch and a half to draw, according to every artist I approached. So we went down with a more toned-down Morgan, but at a much higher level with her armor and her weapons. She was cleaving through undead and getting ready to take on several big bads, including a vampire and a mummy lord. He did the head bad guy as a lich, but I suggested adding glowing orbs in his hand because the positioning happened to be perfect, and it turned the lich into a greater weird from the Mystaran bestiary. And that caused several Mystara fans to go into a tizzy of glee because the weird was back. I sent him several more commissions for the books that were more his style. The Isle of Dawn was pretty simple for an action scene. Phaeacian soldiers against Alphatian soldiers with lightning flashing and spells flying while fireballs and arrows blot out the sky. A full-blown war scene was going to be too busy for the space that I had to work with, so this was a good alternative. He wasn't particularly happy with it because the scene was pretty static, but considering the space that we had to work with, that's the best we could do with what we had. Then we moved on to the celebration scene, which was set in the middle of All's Reckless Day, a holiday in Minrathad that's similar to Mardi Gras, just without the normal restraint. This is one of the few pieces I allowed myself a bit of self-insert by using player characters from my first campaign. I only ever used one of my own characters, a gnome bard with a one-man band that was used for filler a while back. The festival picture featured the core characters from my campaign, back in the day when whoever showed up at Adrian's garage were the people that got to play. Fortunately, Adrian lived in bike riding distance for most of Kinswick, so of course homework decided who played and who didn't, and since I was the DM, if I had homework, nobody played. Still, having a large group meant a variety of players. As far as the art goes, some people didn't like the side boob because female characters aren't allowed to party with abandon, even lawful neutral wizards from Bergthoven who bought designer silk wizard robes and was always correcting everyone's grammar. The kind of character that when she gets just a little bit tipsy, she goes wild. Had to make some minor changes on this because the original version had Tarla's bosoms a little too low in her chest, something that was immediately pointed out to me by numerous artists and playtesters who also happened to possess naturally occurring bosoms. One quick trip to Gimp later, and Tarla's misplaced cleavage was restored to a natural location, and all was well with the world. The third piece was the one where I learned to trust the artist. I needed a gladiator scene for another part of the book. Originally the idea was to have everyone holding up their weapon doing the Ave Imperator speech. Rubus was having none of it, and told me to let him cut loose. So I did, and this is what I got. There's no coincidence that the Greek-style gladiator is up front in the art and winning. Instead of 4 pairs, which would have been too crowded for the space allotted, he killed 2 of them off and went with 3 pairs instead. Again, a few complained that if you zoomed in and squinted, there was side boob in the back. Considering actual gladiators fought with as much skin exposed as possible because they wanted to see you bleed, I didn't give any ground for people demanding a change. I did find later that he put a woman in the crowd copping a feel on another woman, but that stayed an Easter egg because you'll never notice it unless you scour the page for it. Even more obvious is that every gladiator helmet from the helmet art section is worn by a gladiator in this piece. The 4th piece of art was the runic magic section, where a Norseman is about to earn his rune or die trying. This piece of art was rated M for manly, as the Viking and his 2 buddies are both burly types, sans shirts. I wasn't too sure about the way the main character's chest looked, but numerous artists told me that it looks fine, and since I was the only one that didn't like it, don't worry about it. Old mantra regarding any form of art: it's not what you like, it's about what your audience likes. One of the jokes from the Mr. Welch list was a champion's character who over-specialized in dodge and was giving out like -20 to hit to all of the enemies. Not one of my better jokes if you ask me, but to Champions players, apparently it's a knee slapper. It's not what I found funny, it's what they found funny. The art didn't get changed. The 5th piece of art was supposed to be an exchange to showcase part of the goods and services chapter, with a poor Clantier shopkeeper getting a massive amount of items on a list from a ranger returning with a large fortune he's blowing just on magic items. Because in Mystara, buying magic items is a thing. However, Rubus was working himself too hard to meet all of his commissions and told me he was going to have to go on hiatus to clear up an eye infection for a few months. He sent me the name of another Greek artist, Avgi Kaneki, and she took over for the 5th piece of art, and I later used her on a few buildings later in the book. Rubus got better just in time for me to decide that several pieces of chapter art had to go. Wasn't happy with the original art I had, and I decided it needed to be changed. The first change was in the religion section, where originally I had Alina the cleric being restored to life. But the original art never matched what I envisioned, so we went with a scene from the revised 1005 timeline with Odin looking at a werebear that he's considering for immortality, standing on a massive pile of dead goblins. This beat a dead cleric drawing in new breath any day. After that one, the trade and services sections had to go. Instead of 2 merchant princes bidding for a statue, instead we went to the Isle of Dread, where Vestlanders and Tanneroans were concluding a large sale, with the Vestlanders buying a dinosaur and the Tanneroans getting all sorts of trade goods in return. One of the major parts of Mystara is the trade between the nations, and I wanted to show parts of the world that people would recognize. Of special note was the young girl proudly wearing the Vestlander's helmet, which he threw in to seal the deal. It added a nice bit of humanity to the piece. That replaced the 2 pieces of art that I didn't care for, but after a chance meeting with one of the TSR Old Guard at a convention, I was convinced to replace the remaining chapter art as well as the cover because Rubus's drawn art blew away the photo bash that I already had. So I had to fork over several $100 more to him. First up was the most controversial piece he made for me, the Heroes and Races chapter. You know how Americans are generally known as prudes? Well, he was going to prove that point to everybody by giving me a hen sitting on a pile of demon corpses. He actually took out several demons from the original concept for being too many, and then went around killing off the 4 demons that did make the cut. The original art was actually Morgan Ironwolf in combat, but we had issues dealing with the height differences between her and the demons. It's hard to show a 5'8" woman fighting a 16-foot tall Baylor, along with several similar-sized demons, without making her look like Superman. So instead, we went back to the drawing board, replaced Morgan with a hen, and sat her on top of a pile of dead demons to hammer home the fact that this woman just slaughtered a host of demons that would have been challenging to a full level 20 party. First problem was there was too much blood everywhere. The hen was just coated in it, and there was gore just about everywhere else. You can show violence, but you can't show blood, so that had to go. The other aspect was the succubus was topless because you can't show nipples. At least in America. Apparently in Greece that didn't even draw a second glance. Chalk that up to cultural differences. We had complaints about her actually being dead, but she is a chaotic evil sex demon and she was surrounded by a bunch of other chaotic evil demons. Rubus did put a bra on her to silence the people that didn't like the nipples. And then it turned out that because we repositioned all the chapter banners on the relevant pages, that actually just covered up her chest, so the issue faded away. A Day in Glantry was the next piece to be finished for the chapter on magic, and this one I just let him go to town, so he did. How does a city where magic is ubiquitous look? He asked me for some Mystaran monsters to throw into the painting. He drew a scene from Venice, and just started putting Easter eggs everywhere. He grabbed the pocket dragon, the flitterling, and the tabby and put them in. and with a lot of different magical effects everywhere, and to top it off, even put the window washer using a magic carpet, which summed up Glantry perfectly. Mundane uses for magical items. The History and Places chapter, I needed something from Mystara's past, but there was too much to choose from. Glantry was right out. It's barely mentioned in the book anyways. There were several scenes that could have made the cut, like Glantry's wizards assuming power, the crowning of Stefan Karamikos, the arrival of the Ambervilles in Glantry, and way too many more to mention. In the end, we went back to 0 AC, when Thrainkel Thorson drove back the Alphatian invasion and crowned himself Thincal I. Had to make a few revisions to make the wizards look more wizardy, but the image of the angry gladiator leading a massive army of legionnaires and gladiators to counterattack the invasion was just too good to pass up. And it turns out that in a side story, there isn't a Minotaur gladiator from the same time period, and apparently the Mystara fanbase decided that the Minotaur that was in the art is that Minotaur. Then we came to the last piece of art, the cover. This was the toughest because this art was going to represent Mystara returning properly. The original art was Morgan, but it was a photo bash. I decided to recreate one of the more iconic scenes from Mystara history. For the first draft, it was going to be the Siege of Suskian and the Night's Dark Terror. 2 weeks later, I get a message from Rubus saying there is no way he is drawing 6 goblins and a full adventure party on the book and making it look anything coherent. We needed a new battle, so we started going through each module. There was Zargon from the Lost City, but that would look too much like a normal D&D cover with party fighting giant monster. The Veiled Society ambush is a tightly written battle, but it's just humans fighting the party. The Kertoba fighting in Night's Dark Terror was a spoiler. We had done Isle of Dread. Castle Amber is all spoilers. The Manticore fight in Curse of Xanathon wasn't really impressive enough. Then we got to Temple of Death. Rubus fell in love with the Malferas, or at least the concept of them. The original art was bad. They weren't scary, they were cartoons. So he said he was going to make them look scary. We grabbed the original party, dropped the Paladin for a thief. Sorry, Algo. Welcome back, Skeksis. Filled in the rest of the party from the festival art, though we had a continuity error because he accidentally drew Ogren with green skin instead of gray skin this time. By the time we caught it, it was already too late and it was going to be difficult to recolor him. So he's wearing war paint. Yeah, that's the ticket. And for somebody who listened to the last video where I mentioned this, yes, I know the character is named Tarla, not Tila. I misspoke in a previous video, and that has been brought to my attention. Sorry. And Morgan was there, leading the charge. Her heraldry was originally an eagle, but we changed it to a wolf to keep with her theme. Then he added in the Master of Hool, who actually doesn't appear in this scene, but he wanted one of the biggest, baddest Mystara villains to appear on the cover. And that's where we stand. And that is the story behind all of Rubus's art. 13 pieces of art. When I got to making the DM's guide, I fully intend to get him under contract again because I feel that he's going to be one of the biggest upcoming fantasy artists, though his price is going to be going up. But now I have a fully written book, complete with art, and that cost me thousands. I need to get this book to the attention of the powers that be. If you are a reviewer looking for something new to talk about and you would like to discuss this on your channel, let me know and I can get you a copy. If you're watching this and you happen to be somebody who can give the go-ahead, please do so to get this fantastic setting back in the hands of the players. There's countless fans that deserve new materials, and there's even more new fans that are going to rediscover one of the best settings D&D ever created. And that's all I'm asking.